Have you heard that sugar causes diabetes or that only overweight people get type 2? These are just two of the many harmful diabetes myths that are part of the public perception. Benno is here to do some myth busting.
That's right, Mother Love. I'm here with former AADE Diabetes Educator of the Year, Janice Rosler. Today we're going to separate diabetes fact from fiction. Welcome, Janice. We're talking today about all of the myths and beliefs that surround diabetes that really, in most cases, have no basis in fact. Can you tell us about the first one, which is you are cured if you go off your medication?
Well, I wish that were true, but there's no cure right now for diabetes. So if a person is able to stop taking medication because he or she can control the diabetes with diet and exercise alone, it just means that they've got great control. It does not mean that they are cured.
A second myth, and one that I hear of a lot when you talk with type 1 and type 2, is that people who are on type 2 and are living with type 2 diabetes don't need insulin.
I've been a diabetes educator a lot of years, and when I first started 20-some years ago, insulin was for type 1. For people with type 1, that was their treatment, and if someone was taking insulin, they had type 1 diabetes. That's not the case. We've learned a lot about insulin, and we now know that that's a tremendous option for people who have type 2 diabetes.
When I was diagnosed, I remember they were saying, like, you know, people who didn't know about the disease would always say, oh, type 1 is so bad, or that type 1 is the bad kind of insulin-dependent diabetes, whereas type 2 is the good type of diabetes.
Right. Well, a lot of people still say that. And the thing is, if you are not taking care of yourself, both types of diabetes can cause very, very serious complications.
I was diagnosed with insulin-dependent diabetes at a very sort of old age. I was in college. I was almost 20. You know, a lot of people think that type 1 is just for young kids and that type 2 is just for people who are advanced in years, but that's not correct either, right?
It isn't. We now have adults, as you know, who develop type 1 later in life. We have kids who develop type 2, and type 2 used to be something we thought only happened to adults. So across the board, any age, diabetes doesn't discriminate. People are getting all different types.
Diabetes is often called a silent killer, or that you don't know about complications because you may feel well. One of these myths we want to talk to you about is the best way to judge your diabetes health is by how you feel, and that's not accurate either, right?
No, it isn't. There are very, very few people who can do that accurately. So I go by the D-Life motto, which is test, don't guess, because you can get in a lot of trouble if you guess and you guess wrong.
And Janice, what you're talking about also applies to the whole dreaded specter of complications. You may feel great, but if your sugars are elevated over a long period of time, even though you feel fine at the present, you still can be developing complications, right?
You can be developing very serious ones. One thing we know, if your blood sugar level stays high for a very long period of time, not only are you putting yourself at risk for developing serious complications, but you don't notice any change in how you feel. You get used to it.
Now, the whole subject of sugar, even by folks who are really well-intentioned and have your best interest at heart, a lot of people not living with the disease get confused with sugar. One of the myths is that people with diabetes can eat sweets that are sugar-free.
Well, it all depends on the product. But I've seen a lot of sugar-free products in the market that have a lot of carbohydrate and have fat and cholesterol, and their counterpart, which is not a sugar-free product, may actually be healthier. You must look at the label and take a close look at the carbohydrate grams that are on the label. And if you don't know how to do that, see a registered dietitian who can help you learn to do that.
Getting back to that horrible word, complications, you know, I got this around 20 years ago, and I remember being told by people, even medical professionals, that diabetes complications were inevitable and that it was a question of putting them off. The last myth we wanted to address with you is that if you have diabetes, you'll get complications.
Absolutely not true. Complications are not inevitable. I know a lot of people with diabetes who've had it for decades. They're well into their 70s. They are complication-free. They took care of themselves. It can be done.